Hello everyone and welcome to my The Bold Fans channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The Bold and the Beautiful BNB preview video for the week of August 10th to 14th reveals that Deacon Sharp, Sean Cannon, will propose to Taylor Hayes, Rebecca Budig, while Steffy Forrester Finnegan, Jacqueline McInnes Wood, is in for an unpleasant surprise from Sheila Carter, Kimberlyn Brown. BNB's weekly promo begins with Deacon down on one knee, asking Taylor to marry him. Taylor will question if Deacon is serious right now, and he will admit that he is and wishes to spend the rest of his life with her by his side. While Taylor responds to Deacon's life-changing proposition, R.J. Forrester, Brian Nicoletti, will make a different proposal to Electra Forrester, Linnea Grace. There is a hole at Forrester Creations now that they do not have hope for the future to generate sales from younger clients, but RJ will have an idea to fill it. RJ will inform Electra that he believes the next youth line should be hers, and he will play up this notion in the hopes that Electra will agree. This obviously sounds like something Steffy and Ridge Forrester, Torsten K., would be interested in, so RJ believes it will all work out. Meanwhile, Daphne Rose Walton, Muriel Hilaire, will discuss her unfair diagnosis with Carter Walton, Lawrence St. Victor, who will explain that it does not exclude her from carrying a child. Carter will do his best to show Daphne that there are alternatives to explore as they deal with the latest obstacle in their marriage. On John Finn Finnegan's Tanner Novlin flight to Monaco, he'll continue to freak out now that Sheila has joined him. Finn will clearly see the potential for tragedy, therefore he will aim to prevent Sheila from unleashing havoc. Although Finn was unable to get Sheila off the plane, he will still try to keep her from seeing Steffy once they arrive. Finn will swear not to tell Steffy about anything, but he will inform Sheila that she needs to return home. Of course, Sheila will stir trouble in Monaco. The countdown is on for Steffy's Sheila horror, as we know she'll unleash her anger on her mother-in-law in the upcoming episodes. For the time being, Steffy will gaze at the church and anticipate Finn's arrival, but she will not be pleased with the Sheila surprise that is on its way. However, the Bold and the Beautiful spoilers indicate that some twists and turns may change the game for Sheila, so stay tuned for any additional shocking news. The gentle Mediterranean light flowed through the big windows of the cliffside villa in Monaco, and Steffy Forrester Finnegan stood on the balcony, the sea breeze lifting strands of her black hair. Below, the azure sea glittered, boats dotted the harbor, and the distant bustle of the city felt worlds apart from the stresses of Forrester Creations and the tangled web of family strife in Los Angeles. Finn had surprised her by attending the vacation, transforming what was supposed to be a work trip into something more akin to a second honeymoon. They'd wandered the narrow streets together, shared intimate dinners, and even returned to the small chapel where their paths had previously crossed tragically. For the first time in months, Steffy felt the weight on her shoulders ease. But even here, shadows persisted. Sheila Carter's name still evoked a chill. The lady who had once tortured their family, held a gun to Steffy's head, and organized schemes that almost ruined lives refused to recede into the background. Finn's conflicted feelings for his birth mother only made matters worse. Steffy had set a strict policy: no contact, no visits, and no second chances that could imperil their children. Hayes and Kelly deserved to be safe, not in the unforeseen peril that Sheila constantly seemed to bring. Back in Los Angeles, the air felt different, lighter in some ways and heavier in others. Deacon Sharp sat across from Taylor Hayes at a quiet table facing the ocean, the same stretch of shoreline where they had shared so many intimate moments. The divorce papers had been signed many weeks ago. Sheila had eventually released him, but not without her typical dramatic flair and calculating demands. Now the legal links were dissolved. Deacon was free. He stretched across the table to take Taylor's hand. "I've been thinking," he continued, his voice calm but tinged with a vulnerability he rarely displayed. "About us." Taylor's aquamarine eyes observed him closely. As a psychiatrist, she was taught to listen beneath the words, to detect pauses and careful phrasing. But for Deacon, the distinction between professional and personal had long ago dissolved. What had started as a reluctant attraction during counseling sessions had grown into something none of them could deny: even when Steffy requested they stay away and Sheila's presence hung over everything like a thunder cloud. "I don't want to waste any more time," Deacon added. "We have both been through enough. I want to live a life with you. Real one. Not hiding. Not awaiting the next disaster. I want to live together. Every morning. Every night. I want to come home to you." Taylor's breath caught. She had imagined this talk in peaceful periods, when the home was empty and memories of previous heartbreaks seemed remote. Moving in together was a big step, one that would forever change the way the public saw their relationship. It would also entail confronting Steffi's unavoidable reaction when she returned from Monaco. Steffy had already expressed her feelings. Deacon's relationship with Sheila made him dangerous by association. Taylor understood her daughter's protective instincts, but she also recognized the depth of her feelings for the guy seated across from her. "Deacon," she inquired softly, "are you asking me to live with you?" He grinned, changing the expression on his face. "I'm asking you to help me make something. Home. The future. Whatever it looks like. Marriage eventually if you want it or just the two of us together. I'm ready. I have never been more prepared." Taylor was silent for a long time. She then squeezed his hand and nodded. "Yes, I want that too." They left the restaurant together, the choice resting between them like a quiet promise. Later that evening they stood in Deacon's living room, which would soon be theirs, talking about practical details like which furniture would stay and how to reorganize the space so it felt like both of theirs. The chat was routine yet amazing. There's no drama. There are no threats. Only two people chose each other. In Monaco, the commonplace was shattered. It started with a late-night stroll down a less-traveled coastal route. Finn had suggested it after dinner, desiring a bit of alone away from the hotel's activity. Steffi hooked her arm through his, happy with the chilly night air and the sound of waves crashing against the rocks below. They discussed the children, work, and the idea of repeating their vows in the same church where they had met again. For a few precious minutes the world seemed easy. The way narrowed. A figure emerged from the shadows, moving too rapidly and deliberately. There was a scuffle, a piercing shout, the abrupt sense of threat. Steffi tripped at the edge, where the earth plummeted abruptly into the ocean. Finn reached for her, but the attacker's momentum propelled both of them forwards. In the heat of the moment, balance was lost. What happened next would linger in Steffi's memory for years. A second figure emerged from the darkness with amazing speed. Sheila Carter, who had somehow traced them across an ocean, sprang into the struggle. Nobody knew whether her presence was a coincidence, a planned fixation, or something more sinister. What was undeniable was the outcome. Sheila's intervention broke the attacker's grip. She drew Steffi back from the brink with power beyond her size, sheltering her body with her own while the fight continued. Finn recovered immediately, taking down the threat with the assistance of neighboring guards who had noticed the disturbance. When the dust settled, Steffi was injured but unharmed. Sheila stood there, breathing hard, a cut on her arm, her eyes set on her son and daughter-in-law. Her expression a mix of elation, desperation, and what appeared to be genuine concern. Steffi glanced at her with fear. The lady who had once symbolized every horror was now standing between her and major injury, or worse. The contrast was almost too much to handle. Finn's expression conveyed the same shocked conflict. Gratitude clashed with long-standing suspicion. Sheila had saved Steffi. That fact could not be changed, no matter how much Steffi wanted it to. "I didn't come to hurt anyone," Sheila explained, her voice hoarse. "I came to be near my family. When I observed what was going on—" "Don't," Steffi interrupted, her words stern. "Just don't." Later that night, the hotel suite became a pressure cooker of emotions. Finn attempted to negotiate, pointing out that Sheila's actions had averted disaster. Steffi paced, arms curled around herself, recalling every previous betrayal. The thought of owing Sheila anything felt like bile in her throat. However, the recollection of that moment on the cliff path, Sheila's hands pulling her back to safety, would not leave her. "She could have let me fall," Steffi eventually said, and the revelation hurt her. She didn't, Finn said hesitantly. I understand. That does not mean that everything else is erased. But it does change things. It has to. Steffy shut her eyes. The horror wasn't just that Sheila had been present. It was Sheila's presence that had made the difference between life and death. The moral complexities of that fact hung over the room like fog. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Deacon and Taylor were adjusting to their new life. The boxes were partially unpacked. Taylor's favorite books have found a home on the shelf. Deacon cleaned space in the closet without being asked. They cooked a modest lunch together and ate it on the couch, discussing everyday topics like Taylor's patients, a new menu item Deacon was exploring for the restaurant, and how the light fell differently in the evenings now that the space was shared. Steffy and Finn's absence, however, was only temporary. When they returned, the discussion about the future would have to involve them. Taylor knows her daughter well enough to anticipate opposition. Steffy's protectiveness was deep, built from years of enduring Sheila's plots. Learning that her mother had moved in with the man who had previously married the same lady would reawaken every wound. Deacon detected her subtle worry. We'll face it together, he replied, bringing her closer. I am not going anywhere. And neither are you. The days in Monaco were filled with unsettling tension. Sheila hovered nearby, careful not to press too much, but impossible to ignore. She made no dramatic declarations or demands for instant forgiveness. Instead, she remained on the fringe, a live reminder that the past refused to be forgotten. Steffy found herself examining the lady who had once threatened and now protected her. The discrepancy caused a form of psychic whiplash. One evening, Finn saw Steffy alone on the balcony again. You're thinking about it, he replied. How can I not? Steffy responded. She saved me. The same woman who previously held a gun to my head drew me away from the edge. What should I do with that? Finn had no simple solution. He only knew that the lady who gave him life was complicating each chapter of it. Perhaps we don't need to determine everything right now. Steffy leaned toward him, suggesting that we accept the past and go forward. The agony of nearly losing her footing on that route, combined with the deeper dread of owed her survival, if only partially, to Sheila. But underlying it all, the persistent pulse of life continued. She and Finn remained standing. Their marriage, although being frequently tried, remained intact. And somewhere in Los Angeles, her mother was starting a new story of her own. When the journey was finally over and the jet took off from Nice, Steffy glanced out the window at the fading shoreline. Monaco had provided both beauty and danger in equal measure. It also left her with an unbearable obligation to a woman she swore she would never trust again. Back in Los Angeles, Deacon and Taylor prepared for their return. They had agreed to tell Steffy and Finn the truth as soon as the family returned home, about their intention to live together and the silent commitment they had made. There wouldn't be any more secrets. Secrets had already cost too much. The reunion event had its own sense of gravitas. Steffy and Finn entered the familiar space of the Cliff home, jet-lagged and still bearing the emotional aftermath of what had occurred overseas. Taylor greeted them with open arms, relief on her face. Deacon stood at a respectful distance, giving the family space to bond. Steffy was the first to notice the subtle changes. Taylor's stuff mixed with Deacon's, the way they walked about each other with the ease of people who lived together. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Mom, she asked cautiously, is there anything you want to tell us? Taylor took a steadying breath and reached for Deacon's hand. Yes, there is. The conversation that ensued was lengthy, occasionally angry, and frequently interrupted by the lingering trauma of Monaco. Steffy struggled to reconcile her dread of Sheila with her mother's entitlement to happiness. Finn attempted to bridge the gaps. Deacon spoke quietly about his desire for a future free of the shadows of the past. Taylor taught her daughter that love does not always take the safest road. Somewhere in the middle of it all, the narrative of Sheila's intervention in Monaco emerged. The gathering fell silent as Steffy described the incident on the path. The attacker, the near fall, Sheila's surprise appearance, and resolute response. The horror in her voice was undeniable. So was the uncomfortable admission that without Sheila, the outcome could have been disastrous. Deacon's expression soured when he mentioned his ex-wife. Taylor's hand clenched around his. The convoluted past of these 4 people, and the 5th who remained on the fringes, felt suddenly overwhelmingly present. However, at the end of the night something had changed. Not a resolution, not forgiveness. However, it was recognized that life required decisions in the face of intricacy. Deacon and Taylor would continue to develop their home. Steffy and Finn would process the events of Monaco at their own time. And Sheila, wherever she was, had once again put herself into the family's story in a way that no one could easily remove. Outside, the California night was calm and expansive. Inside, 4 people sat, aware that the week had transformed them, some through a proposition promising fresh beginnings, others through a nightmare that compelled them to encounter the most unlikely of saviors. The daring and gorgeous, as usual, refused to provide simple endings, only the next uncertain step ahead. The mellow glow of the late afternoon sun crept through the curtains of Deacon Sharp's modest home on the outskirts of Los Angeles, spreading long shadows across the living room, where he had spent far too many anxious evenings. The divorce papers had been completed weeks before, and the final separation from Sheila Carter was complete on paper, if not in heart. Deacon stood by the window, clutching a small velvet box that weighed more than any decision he'd made in years. Inside was a modest diamond ring, nothing flashy, nothing that reminded of past sins or the sparkling excesses of Forrester creations. It was clean, a representation of the life he hoped to have with Taylor Hayes. Taylor had been an unexpected bright spot in the chaos Sheila had left behind. What began as meetings in her office, with him seeking clarity after the betrayal and repeated cycles of manipulation, had grown into something neither of them could deny. Dinners were shared, and conversations lasted till daybreak. Quiet moments in which her constant presence drowned out the clamor of his past. And now, with Steffy and Finn halfway around the world in Monaco, the house felt emptier, making the next move seem unavoidable. He checked his phone again. There have been no messages from Taylor yet. She was finishing up at the clinic after a late visit. Deacon paced, practicing the lines he had practiced in the mirror earlier that morning. Not a huge speech. Sheila had thrived on dramatic declarations, but not these. Just be honest. He wanted her to move in. More than that, he wanted her to understand this was permanent. The ring was his way of stating it without the strain of a formal wedding proposal. But the prospect of marrying her someday rested nicely in his thoughts now that the legal ties to Sheila had been severed. The doorbell rang. Deacon's heart jumped. He placed the box in his pocket and opened the door. Taylor stood there, her dark hair pulled back loosely, the tiredness of the day melting into a smile as she saw him. "Hey," she said, coming inside and into his arms as if it were the most normal thing on the planet. "I apologize for being late. The last patient required extra time." "You're worth the wait," Deacon muttered into her hair. He drew back just enough to look at her properly. "I made dinner. Nothing fancy. Just the works." She laughed gently. "You cook now. Sheila really did change you." The name lingered in the air for a moment too long. Deacon's smile tightened. "Sheila's not in this conversation tonight, or any night if I can help it." Taylor's expression sparked with comprehension. She understood better than others how difficult it was to completely remove Sheila from their lives. Steffy still bore the actual and symbolic wounds of every plot, every near-miss, and every time Sheila had wormed her way back into Finn's grasp. Taylor had attempted mediation once early on, and it nearly lost her relationship with her daughter. Steffy had been clear. Any remaining connection to Sheila via Deacon was a risk Taylor could not take. They moved into the kitchen. Deacon poured wine while Taylor prepared the table, and the home routine hung over them like a blanket. Conversation flowed easily. Updates on Hope's latest designs, Carter's silent support for Daphne during her trials, and the distant drama of Will and Electra, which seemed to unravel by the day. It was usual, ordinary. Everything Deacon needed after years of living on the brink of Sheila's instability. He set down his fork around halfway during the meal. "Taylor." She looked up, noticing a difference in his tone. "I've been thinking," he said, his words coming out steadier than he expected. "About us. About what comes next. The divorce is final. The house is mine free and clear. And every time you leave here at the end of the night it feels wrong. Like a piece of me is walking out the door with you." Taylor's gaze softened. She reached across the table, her fingertips brushing against his. "Deacon, let me finish." He stood, walked around to her side, and sank to one knee with a practiced ease that felt fresh. The box came from his pocket. When he opened it, the diamond reflected the light. "This isn't me asking you to marry me tomorrow. Not yet. But it is me asking you to take the next step. Move in with me. Build something real. No more sneaking around the edges of other people's approval. No more waiting for the other shoe to drop. Just us." Taylor's palm flung to her mouth. Tears welled up, but they were the happy kind, filled with relief and possibility. "Deacon. Are you sure? After everything?"